Hi, my name is Maddie, and I'm here with Yuki, Finn, and Uma to talk to you about the evolution of the epidermis in vertebrate classes. So the skin is comprised of three layers: the epidermis, which is the outside layer, the dermis, and the hypodermis. We will be primarily focusing on the epidermis, but it's good to note that all three layers work together to protect and contain organisms' internal organs. So land and water animals both have the same three layers of skin, the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, but different sublayers within the skin layers. So for example, cartilaginous fishes, for example, only have 3 out of the 5 epidermis sublayers that mammals have. In land animals, the epidermis is mostly made of keratinocyte stem cells, which develop in the stratum basale. These cells can make keratin, which is the protein that makes up scales, feathers, and hair. The outer layer of the skin, the stratum corneum, is made of corneocytes, which are dead keratinocytes. These cells are stronger and protect the other layers of the skin. Chondriichthyes had placoid scales, also known as denticles, on their skin. They're similar to teeth on the skin and are made of dentine capped with enamel and have a cavity with nerves and blood vessels inside. These denticles help them swim faster by reducing the turbulence and resistance that a chondriichthyes might experience. They also protect the skin by adding an abrasive outside layer to protect from predators. New scales are formed between old ones, unlike other vertebrates. So denticles originally appeared about 450 million years ago. Their origin is genetically similar to teeth. Denticles and teeth are homologous structures. One of the earliest epidermal appendages are odontoids, which is what chondriichthyes have in the form of denticles.
Alright, so here's our poster. You can see there are two groups. There's the osteichthyes, which are these three on my left, and then there's the chondriichthyes, which with its placoid scale. And like Maddie talked about, these placoid scales, they are covered in an enamel-like substance, similar to teeth, in that there's strong outside with nerves and other stuff beneath. And these can be found in sharks. And then we have the osteichthyes subgroup of fish, which have 3 different types of scales. First is the ctenoid. This is a spelling error. It's not pteroid. And you can see that they have little teeth-like things on the scales, and these are called tennae, and these can be found in bass. And then we have cycloid, which are kind of boring. They're a lot more smooth, and these can be found in salmon. And then finally we have ganoid scales, which are more similar to placoid scales in that they are covered in an enamel-like substance called ganoin, and these can be found in gar. And all these osteichthyes scales were all evolved from the placoid scales. And so you can see there's quite a few similarities here, like with the teeth and the enamel. So pretty interesting. Moving on. All right, so moving on to amphibia. The epidermis of the amphibians is the stratum corneum, which is one layer of keratinized cells. And the thin and moist features of an amphibian's epidermis allows them to breathe through their skin, additionally to their lungs. The next layer down is the regenerative basal layer, which is also called the stratum germinativum, and this is separated by intercellular spaces and desmosomes, which provide strong adhesion between the cells. Also, there are mucus glands that supply lubricant to the skin and keep it moist in the air. Some also secrete poisons to protect themselves from predators, like some tree frogs. And the thin skin also makes them vulnerable to water loss. So this means that amphibians can be confined to cold and wet environments.
All right, moving on to the evolution of amphibia. So they evolved during the Devonian period, which is about 400 million years ago. And the skin has evolved and become responsible for a multitude of things, including respiration, which is breathing, osmoregulation, which is the regulation of the water content in the body, and thermoregulation, which is the regulation of the core temperature of the body, and defense, as well as water absorption, so from the environment absorbing water, and communication. Next, reptilia. So the epidermal cells in reptilia are composed of two main proteins, intermediate filament keratins, IFKs, and corneous beta proteins, CBPs. They have a horny outer layer of the epidermis, which is called the stratum corneum. This layer is caused by the interactions between these two proteins, and different cornified epidermal appendages include scales, beaks, and claws. Scales are made of keratin, just like claws, nails, or horns, and they're all made using a slightly different process. Reptilian scales are different than fish scales in that they do not have skin glands or a slimy texture. Some reptiles, like snakes, have the ability to shed old scales. Shedding happens when a new layer of skin in the epidermis is formed underneath the original layer. Then the two layers split, and the reptile can then remove the outer layer. This process of shedding helps the reptile grow bigger and remove damaged scales or parasites. During shedding, the underlying dermis remains unchanged, though. In some reptiles, like turtles and crocodiles, they have scutes instead of scales. The epidermal part, or the visible part, is made of keratin and has a similar structure to nail or horn. Underneath the skin, however, there are bony structures to support the scutes. These scutes are not overlapping like scales. Onto the evolution of reptilia. So evolution in the epidermis for reptilia happened because of cornification. Keratinocytes moved from the basal layer, which is the lower epidermal layer, up to the upper epidermal layer, allowing cornification all over the body. This happens because CBPs start to grow in number and eventually mask the IFKs. Those are two proteins. And this leads to the body being covered in corneocytes, which is why it's called cornification. Claws and scales are adaptations caused by this that helped them colonize land. Claws help them move on land during the transition between living in the water and living on land. Scales on the reptile skin also help protect the skin from water loss and pathogens. This is different than how fish and amphibians got scales. Fish and amphibians got their scales from denticles that cover the body, while reptile scales also are made of keratin instead. Onto Ave, or birds. So the evolution of the epidermis in Ave led to the formation of feathers. The feathers are an outgrowth of the epidermis. There are two types of feathers, pennaceous and plumulaceous. Pennaceous feathers have interlocking hooked barbs and are often stiff and flat, and can be found in birds' wings and tails. So those are like flight feathers. Then there are plumulaceous feathers, and they have barbs that are closely interlocked, and thus they look more fluffy. And these feathers are generally used for insulation, and these can be called down feathers. Feathers can also be different colors to assist in camouflage. Feathers also require some care, so birds that live in temperate climates molt during their flight feathers during late summer in a process called preening. Birds use their beaks to rub their feathers with oil secreted by a preen gland in the base of their tail.
Feathers first appeared about 150 million years ago. First, a dermal papilla is formed, which leads to the formation of the follicle cavity and a dermal papilla that sticks out. Then it forms epidermal ridges, and after that, the barbs are formed. Fine muscles evolved along with feathers to allow control over small movements. This allows birds to bask in the sun by spreading out feathers, or to prevent heat loss by keeping the feathers tight to their body. Feathers also evolved along with flight to allow easier steering, less weight, and prevent heat loss. So, mammal skin has many features. One of them is the sweat gland, which is shown here. So the sweat glands help regulate temperature and remove waste from the skin. The outermost layer of the skin is dead cells that cover and protect the living cells. This color of your skin is determined by melanin, which is produced by melanocytes here in the epidermis. In the epidermis. Melanin determines your skin color by absorbing ultraviolet radiation. So also, hair comes from epidermal follicles that grow from the dermis here, which is the middle layer of your skin. Hair is also pulled upright when cold to keep you warm. In addition, skin has oil glands, shown here. So these oil glands help prevent water loss and are mildly toxic to some bacteria. If these glands get clogged, acne can result. Mammal skin also has a lot of evolutionary advantages. So the skin allows them to retain heat during cold temperatures and keep out heat during hot temperatures. The sweat glands within the skin of mammals allow them to release water and cool the body down. Meanwhile, the hair itself protects the skin from the sun and helps retain heat. These adaptations allow mammals to survive in varying environments, cold as well as hot. Hair can also be helpful in protecting against small cuts, bruises, and other minor injuries. The color of hair can also serve as camouflage for predators. Thank you for listening to our presentation.